I'm going to. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to just mess with this because I'm going to mess with it anyway. Where's Gail? Gail's not down here yet? Hi, Gail. So, my sobriety date is April 23rd, 1985. It hasn't changed since yesterday, so I'm grateful for that. The reason I asked if Gail was here is because the presentation that I was planning on doing was from Carl Jung to Dr. Bob. And Gail did it the other night. So I'm going to just kind of go over a few of the things that Gail had talked about. And then we haven't played any audio. You know, and I'm thinking, you guys are really being deprived. Like, we've got the largest audio library in the world, and we haven't played any audio. It's ridiculous. So last night, instead of sleeping, I put some audio on here. But you know, I mean, coming and hanging out at these places, and like this morning, I feel a little bit like a mosquito in a nudist camp. No, I know what to do. I'm just not sure where to start. Come on, it's Sunday. Sunday fun day. Come on, man. Listen, I want to, before I even get into anything, on a serious note, this started 3 years ago. Jonathan called me, said, Beth and I want to do a history roundup. And I said, oh, okay, nobody will come. and then he said, you know, do you have any people that might be able to help out? You know, speakers or archives or all of that. So we started talking about different presenters and people who could come and do some cool stuff. And I have to tell you that this is the third year. Jonathan and Beth, I don't think you're going to top this year, okay? This was absolutely the best so far. I've at least for me, I've enjoyed every minute of it. I've enjoyed socializing and just hanging out and listening to Gail and the other presenters, and I've just had a really good time, and I hope you have too. Attention, Keith L. Keith L., please come to the podium. Keith L. Oh, Tim. Yes, you don't need to come to the podium. Thank you. So, all right. We all know that Varieties of Religious Experience is the only book mentioned in the big book. Okay? Good? We're good with that. Have you all read it? Oh, yeah. This is an honest group. There were only 3 hands that went up, and those were the 3 people that had an alarm go off yesterday afternoon. So I think they took their meds. I'm determined to get this coffee down. Beth and Jonathan have done a fabulous job. You know, really, they have. The committee, from registration to just, you know, everything has been smooth. I haven't seen anybody get beat up. I haven't seen anybody get thrown out. I have seen a lot of police, but it had nothing to do with us. But, man, it's like after 8 o'clock, you want to just kind of hang out in the hotel. Thank you, guys. Thank the committee. Paul, all the way from Minnesota to drive down here with all of this so that he can allow us the privilege of learning from the visuals and the archives. Paul, thank you for all that you do. In Texas, they have you give your sobriety date. Okay, so there was a meeting at a clubhouse one night down there, and they're going around the room. And Bob says, "I'm Bob, and I haven't had a drink for 14 years." And this guy says, "I'm Wally, and I haven't had a drink for 7 years, 3 months." And then Ed says, "I'm Ed, and I haven't found it necessary to have a drink for 14 years, 6 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, and 7 hours." And David turned back to him and said, "That's a damn lie. I saw you Saturday night, and you were so drunk you couldn't get down the street." He said, "Yeah, but it wasn't necessary." I think every drink and everything else I did was necessary to get me to and keep me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you can clearly tell I need to be here. So, William James does the book Varieties of Religious Experience. And he's popular at the time. People are paying good attention to this. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's worldwide meetings. There's a meeting in the United States, and Carl Jung attends, and they're both at this conference. Okay, so we know that they met. We know they were together. William James wrote that book. It was published in 1902. So Jung doesn't meet Roland Hazard till later on. But things are beginning to happen already, and Gail went through a lot of that with Jerry McCauley, okay, and Samuel Hadley. So Samuel Hadley's story his conversion story is in Varieties of Religious Experience, okay? So it's all the golden thread that's being pulled through the history of Alcoholics Anonymous is just beautiful to uncover and see all the things that happened, but all the things that if they hadn't happened, if one little thing changed, we might not be here. Things might be different today. So I think that it's important for us to realize not only are we making history by being here, preserving our history and sharing it and making it available will help strengthen someone's recovery. Now, I'm saying that with 100% confidence that the people who have followed the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, who have taken the time to learn and study, and not over-the-top geeks. I'm just talking about your average guy, not somebody like me that wakes up in the middle of the night and says, what was, my God, was Bill wearing the same color socks? That's the kind of stuff that, goes on in my head. Okay? But I do know that if somebody learns about our history, it deepens your love and your gratitude. In my dining room, there's a sign on the wall that says, "Begin each day with a grateful heart." And, I try to do that because Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that. And I think I need to play a recording for you. I think you need to hear something. And we had a beautiful presentation yesterday morning about Ebby. How many of you have heard Ebby speak? Okay. Even on a recording, huh? All right. Now, bear with me, guys. I want to share some audio with you. Some of this stuff we've just found. Some of it we've just cleaned up. And Tim's going to make sure that I'm not screwing up. I'm good? So I'm going to play. All right, stay here. Don't leave. Do y'all know Tim? All right. Listen, this is Tim F. And Tim every Tuesday night handles the Recovery Speakers History meeting. He does so much work for us. He came out to see if he wanted the deal. little over 12 years, and he's going to have 13 years in May, so we're proud of him. Don't leave. I want this one.
And I'm beginning to talk, you see, about my own sponsor, Ebby.
Hang on.
See how well-behaved I am?
And I'm beginning to talk, you see, about my own sponsor,
Jesus.
Ebby.
Here.
And here he sits, praise God, in great...
That seemed awful loud up here. Jonathan? Is it all right back there? You can hear it? Okay.
It actually got needs a little more volume.
Now you need more volume. Did somebody say stand up? You guys are brutal.
And I'm beginning to talk.
That's too loud, right? That's good? All right. All right. This was recently cleaned up. It's about 5 minutes long. It's Bill W. introducing Ebby, and then Ebby sharing for a couple of minutes. And I just wanted you to hear Ebby's voice. But we'll start with Bill because this has been like a Dr. Bob weekend, you know. And we don't want to forget that guy in New York, you know, that Dr. Bob's sponsor.
See, about my own sponsor, Ebby. And here he sits, praise God, in great form and good order. Ebby's had his difficulties, and I would venture that considering his obstacles, his demonstration is a whole lot better than my own. It was hard to fireproof him against whiskey, and awfully to fireproof me. And I think he deserves the greatest credit for his wonderful comeback. It's a great dramatic moment. If not a great dramatic moment in my life was the time, half drunk, when the telephone rang and Ebby was in New York sober. The next moment was when I saw him in my doorway and sensed that there was a subtle change. And then came that vital exchange of communication over a kitchen table and a great big crock of gin, which I was drinking and he was not. Ah, yes. For me and for him, that recollection is imperishable, because there, one of the first sparks of many was struck, which was to kindle this worldwide spread on both fronts. So, Ebby, come on up and have a go at it.
members of the Oxford group, and Sam Shoemaker was sitting right over here, and many others. I went over to see Bill. And Bill was just as ready and disgusted with his life as I was a couple of months before that, when the boys came to me. So it was a matter of circumstances, and I just happened to be the guy that was in the spot at the time. I tell you, it's nice to be here. This is my first visit to the West Coast. And I've been living in Texas for about 7 years. And I'm not a native Texan, but when a Texan can come out here and say that the weather's good, that's something. And it certainly is if this is a sample of it. I'm grateful that I'm here because, as Bill said, I've had trouble over the years. I've been in and out of the initial 2.5 years of my sobriety in the beginning. And I don't, 7 years ago, I doubted very much that I was going to get through that summer. And I had little thought of being out here or having another nearly 7 years of sobriety, which I have had in Texas. If it means anything, it means to anybody that's having trouble, try it again. Get up and try it again. You won't do it yourself, but you'll get the help from a higher power, I'm sure. And I haven't much more to say, except it's good. And to meet such a nation, I've heard of her work over all these years, but this is my first time I've had the honor of meeting. And of course, I haven't seen this old budget Bill very often. It's good to get back with him and Lois. And my gratitude to God and to all the people in AA. Thank you.
All right. Excuse me.
Where was that from? Airport.
That recording was taken from the International Convention in Long Beach in 1960. A lot of the meetings were outside, so you could kind of tell. You know, I mean, if you really think hard about it, you could tell. It's like airplanes and trucks and yeah. But I really wanted you to hear Ebby, and you know, and Ebby said he had 7 years sober at the time. Ebby was a really, really, really important person in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Ebby likes to tell this story that these two guys showed up while he was painting the house. And they start talking to him about the Oxford group. And he's more interested in drinking and finishing up the house painting, but he's letting them talk. And he said, you know, he knew these guys. One was Shep Cornell and the other was Sebra Graves. And he said, they were drunks, but they weren't really alcoholic like me or something. You know, it's like, I don't know, but yeah, I suppose most of us say that they were way worse than us, you know, but Ebby wasn't saying that about these two guys. And he said that they left him with a book. And he took the book and they went on and he read the book. It was difficult to identify what book that was because Ebby didn't name the book, okay? But with some investigative research, okay, and the fact that 1934, the most popular book in and around New York and that area among the Oxford group was a book called I Was a Pagan. V.C. Kitchen, okay? So we've been able to identify that is the book that Ebby was given by Shep and Sebra when they came to visit him in, it was probably July of 1934. Later that summer, Ebby gets picked up and has to go to court. And it's a Friday. And the judge comes out and says, I can't deal with Ebby today. Ebby, you come back here on Monday and I want you sober. And he let Ebby go. And Ebby went to the house and spent the weekend. Can you imagine that weekend? The hell? You can't drink. You know you got to go to court on Monday morning. You're going to end up going to jail for a little while because you already know that that's what they have to do with you. You got a half a dozen bottles of ale in the basement. Ebby said, I knew the judge didn't want me to drink, but I had these 6 bottles of ale in the basement. He'd go down into the basement and he'd open the refrigerator and look at them. And then he said he had like a good angel on one shoulder and a little devil on the other. And the angel's going, no, Ebby, that judge wants you sober. And the devil's saying, Ebby, come on. Just have one. So Ebby said he did this a few times. And then finally he went and got a paper bag. And he put the 6 bottles of ale in the paper bag. And he took them and he gave them to his neighbor. Now, that's amazing to think about, giving your last 6 bottles of beer to a neighbor you don't even like. The neighbor called the cops on him for shooting the pigeons. So I suspect that weekend was a difficult weekend for Ebby. And I can imagine Ebby showing up in court on that Monday morning in the condition that he must have been in. After not drinking for the weekend, knowing that he's going to jail, embarrassed again, always embarrassing his family. And here he is, he shows up, and those 2 guys that came to see him in the yard showed up too, Zebra and Shep. And the judge calls Ebby up, and these men stand up and come up with him. But this time there's another man with him. And the third man in the crowd is a guy named Roland Hazard. Now the thing you have to take into consideration and understand is that the judge's name was Judge Graves. One of the 2 guys was Zebra Graves. He was the son of the judge. Talk about a golden thread, okay? God has pulled a golden thread through each and every one of these circumstances and events. The judge looks over his desk and he sees his son, a sober man. And he sees Roland and Shep. And with the love that only a father for a son could have, looks over that bench and says, Roland, if you can do for this man what you've done for my son, I'll release him to you. And Ebby walked out a free man with 3 members of the Oxford group so he could start carrying a message that he hadn't yet received. It was a golden thread. What did they do with Ebby then? They didn't put him in a detox center and start lecturing him. They didn't give him a stack of books and told him to read them. They got him into action and they said, Ebby, we got a house party 13 miles away and it's in a fire hall and the community is going to be there and we're going to go give testimony and you're going to come with us. And they started bringing Ebby out to these little house parties. They call them house parties. Sometimes they were in houses. Sometimes they were in community buildings. Sometimes they were in churches. But wherever they could meet and congregate, the Oxford group was trying to get the word out. And they weren't dealing with the derelicts and the drunks and the low bottoms and that. They were dealing with the upper echelon. The Oxford group was bringing in people who were leaders in the community and leaders in their state and leaders in their businesses. And the Oxford group was going after those folks because they felt that they could carry their message quicker, more powerful, and be able to be more attractive. So they went that way. And here you got Ebby and Roland and Shep, and they're going out in New England, and they're hitting all of these little communities and doing these house parties and talking about things like surrender. Things like, so the surrender, okay? And then confession. And they would do it they're out loud. They would do a community confession in the house parties. And then people would listen and comment. And I mean, I can't even imagine standing in front of a group of people like you and telling you the things I've done. Oh yeah, that's what we do. Very, very similar to what we do, I mean, it wasn't a situation where they were doing a fifth step, not in a house party, but they were sharing the things that they felt that they needed to have overcome. And Henrietta, or Gal, was sharing some of that about Henrietta with us over the weekend. Well, they get Ebby to New York, and Ebby's going to start making some amends. So he's down on Wall Street, and he inquires about his friend Bill W. And he asks, hey, how's Bill doing? And they say, oh, Bill's not good. He's probably already been put in a sanitarium. His alcoholism we just don't see him anymore. And Ebby knew that he had to call on Bill, because he wanted to share with Bill what had been freely shared with him. And he called. Now, remember the dollar bill, right? Okay, the different versions of the same story. Okay, you're going to get a little different version. So this is Ebby's version of the kitchen table experience. Okay, I called over to the Wilson house, and Lois answered. And I told her I was in New York and I was sober. I had been this way for a while. And I was meeting regularly with the Oxford group, and part of what we were doing is carrying a message of hope to other folks. And I really like to see if Bill might be interested in this message, because I've been able to stay sober. And I'm sober today. And Lois said, oh, God, Ebby, thank you. Please, come, let's have dinner. And she scheduled a time for Ebby to come for dinner. And Ebby said he showed up on that day. He got there a little bit early, and Bill and Lois weren't there yet. Lois's family's caretaker, a guy named Greens, was there, and he let Ebby in. And shortly after that, Bill showed up, and they had a little bit of small talk, Ebby said, and then Bill had to run out to the delicatessen. Probably needed a pack of cigarettes or something, and or something. And Ebby said then Lois showed up, and the lady that lived upstairs showed up, and Lois prepared dinner, and they all went to the parlor and had dinner. And then Ebby said, then Lois asked Ebby, what's been going on? And Ebby said, for the next 5 hours. When Dr. Bob talked the other day, when Gail was talking, what we've learned about Dr. Bob is he sometimes would talk to these guys for 5 or 6 hours. He said we must have hidden their clothes. Yeah. So Ebby wanted to give Bill a powerful message, one that would hook him. Those are Ebby's words, okay? He knew that he had to hook Bill, because Bill would either take this thing or have nothing to do with it. So Ebby said he gave 5 hours. And he talked about how he had to accept that he was defeated, that he was done, that there was nothing left for him with the drink. Then he had to believe in some sort of God, even if you tried it as an experiment. Then he had to write down his life story and then do a confession. So steps 4 and 5, confession. Then the next thing was he had to pay restitution for the things he had done and the people he had harmed. So now he had to make right the wrongs. It's kind of like our step 9. And the last thing was he was to carry this message to someone else. Now, I don't know why it took him 5 hours to communicate that to Bill. But on the way to the so the kitchen table experience, all right, you got this? According to Ebby, was the parlor where they sat, the four of them all together, including Bill, and Ebby gave the pitch. Bill walks him to the subway. It's about 12:30 in the morning, and Bill walks him to the subway and puts his arm around Ebby, and he says, "I don't know what you got, but I want it." Now, I don't know about you. We know Ebby had a message of depth and weight. Bill talked about his eyes. He could see. He could see that this man was sober. He had clear and clean eyes. Well, that's Ebby's version of the kitchen table. I don't know if Bill's version or Ebby's version, which one is accurate. I know that Bill was drunk and Ebby was sober. Well, Bill tried to stop drinking, but he was unsuccessful. And he had another relapse, and this one was a bad one. And wow, that was weird. Bill found himself going back to Towns Hospital. He had already been there 3 times. He was embarrassed. Didn't even tell Lois. Takes a cab. Has the cab stop at the delicatessen. Must have been his favorite delicatessen. Grabs some beer for the ride to the hospital. And said as he walked in the door waving the bottle of beer, he said to Dr. Silkworth, "Hey, Doc, I got it this time." And the good doctor said, "You sure do. Now go up and sleep it off." And Bill said that 3 days later, he woke up in the morning in the hospital. And he looks into the doorway, and there's a guy standing in the doorway, and it's Ebby. And the first thought that goes through this guy's mind is, why isn't he out looking for a job? Because everybody was broke. Everybody needed money. They needed to... "Ebby, come on in." Ebby sat at the side of the bed, and Bill looked at him and said, "Ebby, what was that simple formula that you shared with me a few weeks ago at my house?" And Ebby said, "Oh, Bill, you got to be licked. You got to be done. You got to be you got to try to believe in a God of some kind, even if you try it as an experiment. You have to write your life story down and give a confession. You got to face the people that you've hurt and pay restitution for the sins and the things you've done wrong. And then you've got to be willing to take this message and carry it to another person." And Bill said Ebby left the room. Now I want you to know that Bill Wilson had a life history of depression since his childhood school girlfriend passed away suddenly while he was in high school. And Bill suffered from depression. And he said Ebby left that room and he fell into the darkest depression that he had ever experienced in his life. You can just imagine the hell that he must have been experiencing to be able to say that that was the darkest depression he had ever had. And in the depth of that depression, he cried out as a child, "If there's a God, show himself." And he said the whole room lit up a bright white light. He felt like he was on a mountaintop and he could feel the breeze of the Spirit blowing through. And he knew he had been released. Every time Bill shared that story, it was the same story. You knew that that was printed on his soul, that Bill had become a free man and had a mission. He just didn't know what it was yet. And the doctor comes in and he says, "Doc, help. I think I'm losing it. I think I'm hallucinating. What did you give me?" And the doctor listened. When the doctor asked him a few questions, and we got all done, he said the words that has made it possible for us to be here today. He said, "No, Bill, you're not hallucinating, and it's not the medicine. What it is, I don't know, but it's much better than what you had before. You weren't hallucinating. Hang on to what you have." In a letter that Bill wrote in December 25th in 1941 to Dr. Silkworth, something like this: "Dear Doctor, no time is like Christmas to remember our friends with gratitude and thanksgiving. And this Christmas I send you this note to tell you of my appreciation, because 15 years ago you didn't tell me I was hallucinating. And because of that, I'm sober today, and so are thousands of others. Thank you." Think about the gratitude that Bill Wilson had 15 years later to this little doctor who loved drunks, to on Christmas Day to sign and make that handwritten note. When I saw that, I literally was blown away. And you know, I've gotten to see some really cool stuff, being around archives and traveling, but nothing has touched me more than that letter. Because that letter to me, I've seen the doctor's opinion letter, the actual, letter, but this little note meant more to me because it told so much about the miracles that had to happen, the golden threads, seconds and inches, how things had to, if they didn't work, what if Silkworth would have said, "Yeah, listen, Bill, you're going to have a few more of those, because what she's dripping into your arm right now is what's causing that." None of us would be here. So Bill gets sober. He asks permission if he can start talking to drunks in the hospital. We saw the lay minister coming out of the Emmanuel movement, and they were starting to have lay therapists, okay, that could do this. But well, here Bill W. in New York City in a hospital that is nationally known for addiction treatment, and here he is asking the doctor after his 3 times failing, "Doc, can I talk to your patients about how they can get sober?" I don't know about y'all, but in Denver, Colorado right now, they would not let me go into hospital to talk to alcoholics as a lay therapist if I told them that I was sober for 4 days. Tell me Bill Wilson wasn't a salesman. My God, the guy still got the slippers and the robe on, and they're letting him visit. Oh, yeah, go ahead. And he's bringing these derelicts home. Hey, come on, guys. We're going to go party at my house. Lois is working. But don't worry, she'll come home and feed us later on, you know. This was what was going on, and nobody was getting sober. Bill did this for 6 months. He's bringing people in. He's trying to give them a message that he didn't have, okay? I mean, the message he had was, God struck me. And he'll strike you? That message wasn't working. Dr. Silkworth said, dude, slow down on that, white light experience, okay? The breeze of the Spirit. Let's hold off on that a little bit, Bill. Let's talk to them first about the fact that their body is different than a person who doesn't have this affliction. Their body takes the alcohol and does something different with it, and it causes them to have an obsession for more and a compulsion once they start drinking. And then they can't. Why don't you lay that on these guys, and then you can hit them with all this, white light stuff, Bill. Well, Bill had thought he failed. I mean, after close to 6 months, it was like 5.5 months, he's getting ready to go to Akron. He's going to see if he can get hooked up with this business deal that he's trying to put together and become a big shot once again. But he's starting to fall into depression. He's starting to doubt himself. Am I going to be able to do this? Can I handle this? Is Lois okay? Will I be able to get back? He makes the trip, but he's got no money. Lois says to him before he goes, Bill, it's going to be okay. And Bill's like, honey, I've been working with these guys for 6 months and nobody's gotten sober. And she said, oh, Bill. No, Bill, you don't get it. You've stayed sober. So when Bill went to Akron, he had something to say to this doctor. See, if he would have just given the doctor the same stuff he had given these guys in New York, that doctor would have looked at him and said, well, all right, boy, I've tried that. We'll see you later. No, Bill had to hit him with some stuff that he had never heard. I believe that what Bill hit him with was directly from Dr. Silkworth. It was because one doctor was communicating through another doctor, and they used Bill Wilson as the vehicle to do that communication. I think that's where the message of depth and weight was. And that's okay, because we know that Bob and Bill came out of that little meeting in the library, and the course of mankind changed. It just didn't affect a few people in Akron, Cleveland, New York, and Philadelphia, and New Jersey, and Chicago, and Detroit, and L.A. No. It affected everyone. And it still does today. Because you see, each one of you that are sober today are going to leave here, and you're going to come in contact with anywhere from 15 to 40 people before you go to bed tonight, and they're going to see you sober. You see, what we have attracts to everyone. It's not. That's why in 1965, when they had the theme of the International Convention was, I am responsible. And I said, I am responsible when anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I am responsible. You see, this program isn't a program about telling. It's a program about seeing. People need to see these principles in action and see how we live. All right, I told you I wanted to play a little recordings for you, so I do want to do that. Let me go to this one. AA number 3 was Bill D. Okay, and Bill had a real strong accent. So it's hard to hear him. We just were able to get this cleaned up so that it's going to play good. And, hey, everybody, this is Tim. Isn't he doing a great job? Are we ready?
Best Tim on the stage.
He is. I mean, and, he's the most recent Tim on the stage, too.
Ready?
Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, AA number 3, Bill Dodson, live, Canton, Ohio. Was it in Canton? Yeah.
Kenmore.
I want to thank you folks for inviting me down here. Next thing, I want to congratulate you on having as many here as you have on your first anniversary. I think it was on our 9th anniversary that we had over in Akron High that I heard Doc get up and make this statement. I never paid much attention to statistics about any kind of statistics about AA. It never made any particular difference to me who was first, second, third, or fourth. But I heard Doc get up and make this statement. He said that at our first anniversary, we had 6 at the end of the year. Well, I didn't remember that. And he said that 4 of them were here tonight. That was on our 9th anniversary. He said that 4 of them were here tonight. 1 of them dead, and 1 of them's out of town and couldn't be here. Well, I happen to know that a couple of them that were there had a little trouble during those 9 years, but they were there that night and were sober. And so that's all we had on our first anniversary was 6, and of course there were several times 6 here. And of course, when we had that anniversary, I certainly never expected to be down in North Canton talking to folks. And a lot of the other places where I have been and talking, we just had in mind that we get sober and stay sober. And to do that, we had to go out and take this program to a few people and enough to get sober and stay sober ourselves. And then that would be the answer. Now, that's all I had in mind. I know, and I'm pretty positive that there wasn't anything much else in the mind of the others except to stay sober ourselves. That early thought has been worth quite a little bit to me. In 2 or 3 ways. I haven't felt any great responsibility about the movement being such a wonderful movement and all those great things that are going to be done. I even had a woman after one of the meetings I was to, she come around, she's been a missionary in China for a long time. A very wonderful woman. She said, this is wonderful. She said, maybe this is the answer to world peace. And I said, well, I don't know. Anyhow, I hope that the answer to peace in a lot of homes around here in Akron where you used to get down and fight with each other. Now if you can carry it on over and make the world peace out of it, that's fine. But I have always had in mind that the main purpose of AA was to stay sober.
That was Bill D., AA number 3. And that recording has been circulated for many, many years, but we finally have the technology to get it cleaned up to a point where we can understand what he's saying. And even then, it's a little bit hard. If you listen to it about 15 times, on the 16th time, you start talking like him. I think it's good, you AA. Hey, we're just going to say some prayers now. All right. Listen. Can you? So Bill gets to Akron. The business deal's not happening. At least he doesn't know that it is. And he's broke. And for the first time in 6 months, he thinks a drink sounds good. He said it was the first time since he had his spiritual experience in Towns Hospital that the drink was in front of him. And while he is there, and Lois is in New York, he doesn't know anybody in Akron. It's not like he's calling Bob or Billy Boy and saying, hey, I'm going to come over and we'll have a bologna sandwich, okay? This guy is afraid he's going to start drinking. He had been sober for 6 months after burning his life to the ground. He had been trying to help people unsuccessfully. He felt good because he had some of the principles of the Oxford group that he was beginning to use, and they were beginning to have some of the daily meditation and daily prayer. And please, we sometimes make the mistake of thinking that Dr. Bob was, the Christian spiritual dude that had it all down, and Bill was a heathen, and he was agnostic, and he didn't. Jonathan has a letter that Bill talks about being over at Bill Dotson's house and talking to Bill Dotson's wife, Henrietta. And Henrietta says to him, well, I don't have any sins. Because that was the way they talked then, okay? And Bill Wilson looks at her and says, oh, well, how about how you've been treating your husband and your son? And she said, well, maybe I've sinned a little. And the next day they were having lunch at Bill Dotson's house. And Bill Dotson was still confused by this thing. And he was trying to figure out, what are these guys, how are they sober? What are they doing? What is this? And he said that Bill Wilson was talking to his wife Henrietta across the table, and he looked at her and he said, I am so grateful to God for having saved me of this curable thing that I just want to keep talking about it and telling people. If you'd like to know where that is, it's in your story, AA number 3, Bill D. And there's a lot of power in that story, AA number 3. Now, AA number 3 story wasn't written until after Bill passed away. And it was written by Bill Wilson with the permission of Bill Dotson from recordings and the times that they had spent together. So when you see Bill Wilson writing through Bill Dotson, talking about sin, Christ, God, you start to see, wow. And back in the 30s, when anybody would have one of these conversion experiences like Bill had, they didn't call them white light experiences. They called them Christian conversions. Okay? That's what they call it. Was a Christian conversion. Now, had Bill called his white light experience a Christian conversion, we might not be here. But 99 out of 100 people in New York City at the time would have called it a Christian conversion. Okay? Bill Wilson had the insight to not do that. And as a result of that, he opened the door for every one of us to have a similar experience. You see, because that's what they teach us. You see, if we do this program, what happens? Having had a spiritual, as a result, it doesn't say, if you get to this point, you might have this happen to you. Okay? It makes it very clear that if we take these actions, this is the result that we're going to get. And I believe that that's what makes the difference for Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, we're given a track to run on with a goal at the end. And the goal at the end is what? A closer relationship with a God. Because that's what solves our problems. And we all have the same problem. Everybody in this room has the same problem. And we only have one problem. And it's all the same problem. It's not getting what we want. All right, so Gail showed you the wire recording that is now at Dr. Bob's house where you can hear Ann Smith. It's the only recording of Ann Smith there is that we have found so far. And then you can hear Dr. Bob, and then you can hear Smitty and his wife Betty, all on this beautiful recording. I want to play a recording for you, okay? But I'm not going to play you that one. If you want to hear that one, go to Akron, okay? Go visit Dr. Bob's house and press those buttons and experience that and know that in that bedroom they sat there with George Hood and they passed that microphone around and they were all nervous and they sent this message to Bill and Lois, and what a beautiful thing to do. And then Bill and Lois decided that they would do the same thing, so Bill sent a message back to them. Am I good or do I need my assistant?
This is for identification purposes only.
Hey everybody, here, this is Tim. Now, okay, and this is the truth. Like, we've been doing these history meetings every Tuesday night for 5 years. Okay, we've done these kind of things where we're going out and doing it, and I've done PowerPoints, all kinds of stuff. And then everybody listens to me and occasionally says, "Oh, you did a good job, Mike," and I'm taking all the bows and everything. But Tim does the work. I mean, so thanks, Tim. And now that Tim's, yeah. So now we've got Andrew, who's my right hand and works with Tim and I and handles the administrative stuff of Recovery Speakers, which can be a really big job with a nonprofit and trying to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's and doing things right. So we're grateful for Andrew and his contribution. What? No, I did. I don't want them to hear me. I want to play a recording. Yeah, this could be he might tell me that he's done. All right, here's Bill's response to the beautiful recording that was sent to him.
This is for identification purposes only. In the summer of 1947, and in Lake Joan, the operator of this recorder was going east to New Haven, Connecticut. He took with him the recorder and stopped in at Akron to see Dr. Bob and Annie. They had both just shortly returned from the hospital after serious operations, and Annie was confined to her bedroom.
Okay? That's, if you want to hear the rest of that. If you want to hear the rest of that, go to Akron.
Hello, Ann and Bob. Isn't this a great gadget that we have to talk through? It was mighty good to hear from George how much better you both are. You have no idea of how terrifically concerned so many of us have been. Now that the worst is over, we can all breathe better. I've just been having a long talk with George about the state of AA affairs out through the country. And he has sharpened up to me, as he doubtless did to you, the tremendous necessity of getting some sort of council organized which can relate the foundation to the AA groups. I also went over the internal situation here with George, and on the whole, he is inclined to think that the changes suggested in the reorganization plan are really necessary for us here in New York before we actually start the formation of a council. We'd awfully much like to know if you won't come down to Bedford Hills sooner than the fall. But I suppose there is small use in begging you. You know, I still feel very awkward and hard put to find words to talk into this microphone. As you see, I have a good deal of mic fright. Even now, I am beginning to get more and more confused. In fact, my face is getting quite red. For you know, I am not one who usually likes words. Lois and I hope you both will surely get well and strong. And that very, very fast. We think of you so very, very much, dear people, and look forward to the moment when we can see her. See you. I've still got the mic fright. This is your announcer cutting in. We're now going to have a violin solo by Bill the Virtuoso.
Come on, is that cool or what, man? I gotta tell you that when we first got the wires, and one of them had Ann and Bob, and you know, we got the dogs to sleep and the kids to sleep, and got a wire recorder and a microphone and all that, so we could, and turned it on and heard the voices. God, just something, you know. And I've been doing this a long time, and it takes a lot to move me. It takes a lot for me to go, wow, that's incredible. But every once in a while, I'll hear something. And I have to tell you, the majority of the growth of Alcoholics Anonymous from 1935 to 1942 happened in and around Akron, Cleveland, okay? And it spread through the Midwest. But that was the hot pocket. So many of the first 100 members were from that area. And, you know, this talk was from Jung to Dr. Bob, and I kind of did a little of that. What I wanted to share with you, because I'm not one of these guys who think we need to go back and make AA the way it used to be, okay? Because we don't need to do that. We've never had a better time for Alcoholics Anonymous than right now. There are, and AA has never worked better than it does right now either. Okay, people think, you know, nobody's getting sober in AA anymore. You know, 1%. You know. Listen, man. If there are, I don't know how many people are sober in the world, but Alcoholics Anonymous is the grandparent, okay? And our job as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and our responsibility is to act like grandparents, okay? Be kind to these other organizations, AA, NA, CA, PA, GA, SA, and on and on. Our job is to connect with them, support them, and encourage them. Now, I'm going to let you hear a talk from a man who was a 91st member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? This is my closing. I'm going to close with this, and then I'm going to invite Beth up, and she's going to thank a couple of people, and then she's got a special closing. But this is my closing, and this man's name was Dewey Spies.
Today, I like to look at upon God as a great light that shines across the pathway of life. All I have to do is face that light, and the shadow will fall back at me. It's as simple as that. Now, before I close, I want to turn back the pages of AA history to the early days, just for a brief few moments. The days when we had just cause to fear that internal dissension, jealousy, dishonesty, whatever, intolerance would destroy AA while it was yet in its cradle. When I came into the fellowship, we had no traditions, no established precedents for guidance. Every problem, every new problem we faced was necessarily solved by trial and error, and sometimes we came very nearly resorting to our fists. And that's not the accepted way of winning friends and influencing friends people. I'm sure of that. We were immature, unstable. We argued for the sake of argument, and about the only thing we could agree upon was that there were two sides to every question, our side and the wrong side. We appointed committees to look after this, and we appointed committees to look after that, and then we appointed committees to look after the committees, so we could find more things to fight about. Well, this unhappy state of affairs gave birth to the idea of establishing a universal code of standards or ethics, which later came to be known as the 12 traditions of AA. And through strict adherence to these traditions, AA eventually, the order emerged from chaos, and we established unity, which is essential to our progress, and is no exaggeration to say that AA owes its very life to strict adherence to those traditions. And the longer I am in AA, the more conscious I become of my individual responsibility of maintaining and conforming to those traditions, so that the alcoholic of tomorrow will have the same chance for sobriety that I have today. Surely that must be the sacred obligation of every man or woman who's gained sobriety through the AA program. If Abraham Lincoln had been in AA, I think he would have spoken about our individual responsibility in a manner something like this. 109 years ago, our co-founders brought forth a new plan, conceived in love and service, and dedicated to the proposition that the alcoholic can be restored by the grace of God and the help of his fellow AAs. Today, we are engaged in a great humane effort to make that plan available to all who may be concerned. However, we cannot dedicate, we cannot concentrate, we cannot further that plan by mere word of mouth, but rather by assuming our individual responsibilities of personally carrying the message of AA to those who still suffer. The world will little note nor long remember who we are or what we are. But what we do here will never be forgotten. It is for us who are willing and able to ever increase our efforts in this great field of endeavor, without hope of gain, reward, or recognition. It is ours to carry the torch and to work with increased devotion to the unfinished task which lies before us. It is for us to highly resolve that this new way of life, granted by God, shall not have been given in vain, and that this fellowship of AA, by AA, and for AA shall not perish from this earth. Thank you.
That guy could put it down. Man. Well, we've come to that time where I'm going to invite Beth to come up and say to you all, thank you very much for a wonderful weekend.